Hello and welcome to this channel. I'm Olschi and I'm here to talk to you about mostly manga and comics. If you're watching this, then I guess you create comics yourself, or maybe you like reading them, or you're one of my friends whom I forced to watch this channel so I get more views. So what is this channel gonna be about? I mean, I do have already some videos up, but they're like mostly random, speed paints, working progresses, nothing special really. There is a lot of material out there on how to draw comics, but it's mostly about designing characters, anatomy, color, perspective and so on. But there aren't many channels who kind of concentrate on the storytelling part about it, and I really miss that. It's because most comic artists don't care about the story. Of course not. Most comics start with a story, with an idea that an artist gets and then just has to materialize in a row of sequences and pictures and speech balloons and all these other elements that make up a comic. But that's where it gets tricky. How do you put everything in a clear order? How do you express your ideas without describing too much? How do you communicate clearly? How do you create a certain mood? And most of all, how do you finish? Dude, comics take so much time to make. Oh, well, don't worry, that's what I'm here for. You might wonder, who are you and what qualifies you to give us advice? I didn't think this through. Oh wait, now my bachelor thesis was about narrative structure in manga. So there you have it. Okay, let's start this series with a simple question. What is more important when you draw a comic? The art or the story? Well, the answer is both. Okay, we have our answer. I'll see you next week. Actually, the answer isn't that simple. And each author or artist may view it differently. As a rule of thumb, we can say that art is what gets the attention of the reader, and story is what keeps the reader want to come back. Let's say you're at the bookstore and you want to buy a new comic or a manga. You're just browsing. And there's so much choice. Where do you even start? You look at the covers and some of them get your attention. And this is where the selection process already starts, at the visuals. The comics you're going to pick up at this moment are the ones most visually pleasing to you. Maybe with the exception of some books that you already heard about and you heard that they're supposed to be good. You flip through, read the summary, which sounds good at the time, and decide to purchase the book. Then you get home, read the comic, and the story is just meh. So now you wasted your time and money, and you will probably never buy the book of the same series ever again. And this is where the journey of you and the series ends forever, if the story is poorly written. A reader might buy initially but will not continue buying the following volumes. So that means that the story is more important, right? Wrong. The problem is, when the art is bad, it never gets to the stage of deciding whether you want to continue reading a story or not, because you just never bought the book in the first place. You can compare it to dating. Let's say you meet a super hot guy or girl. In this case, I'm using a guy because I need to practice drawing hot guys. And he's pretty hot, like super hot. You can just stare at them and admire how pretty they are. Soon enough, you find out that he doesn't go to the movies. He doesn't like dressing up for Halloween, and he doesn't like cake. He never jokes, and all he ever talks about are his hot biceps. He might be good for looking, but that's pretty much it. Hanging out with him is pretty unbearable and boring. Then there is a person who's pretty amazing. He's funny, sportive, a good dancer, and not only does he like cake, he's actually a hobby cake baker. Is that what you call the profession? But there's one problem. They have a massive mouth. Not just a somewhat above the average big mouth, but a mouth that takes up half of his head. First of all, you might not even talk to him in the first place, thinking, okay, nope. And even if you end up talking to them, all you can think about is how incredibly massive their mouth is and totally miss out on a potentially great conversation. And then there are people who combine both empty personality and monstrous mouth. Just kidding, I mean someone who has a great personality and hot looks. Someone with whom you can hang out without being bored or constantly worry about him eating your whole head. And that's what a good comic should be like. It should get the attention and keep you interested. Which is easier said than done, obviously. Art and story should be symbiosis, they should harmonize. Good art is not just proportions and correctness, it's also expressiveness and dynamics. And the story is more than just a chronological order of events. It's characterization, pacing, world building, and so on. Of course, there are plenty of manga or comics where the one thing outweighs the other. For example, I bought this manga when I was in Japan because I found it super pretty. I liked the cover, the illustrations, and the character designs. Do I know what the story is about? Vaguely. I never really finished reading the story because it just never resonated with me. I didn't even finish this whole book. I only read like 2 chapters and I was like, man, it's in Japanese, and it's hard and it's boring. Why should I waste time on it? But it's pretty. Look at how pretty it is. And of course it's okay to buy a book simply because it looks pretty. I mean, maybe you can learn something from it. Looking at pretty things is just fun. An example where the story is stronger than the art is probably Attack on Titan. I love the story because of its unique setting, because of its themes and its pacing, its action scenes. I mean, these battles, come on. But the art isn't always perfect. Like quite often, especially when the artist draws a group of people, you can see some things that are off, where like the characters look somewhat stiff or like the proportions are not exactly right, which is for Japanese market rather unusual because most mangas that make it from Japan to here are just perfectly drawn, and Attack on Titan isn't. Then again, there are some drawings that just amaze me, and yeah, maybe Attack on Titan isn't the best example for this. But with Attack on Titan, it doesn't bother me because I mean the story is pure gold and just really, really interesting, and you just want to keep on reading. Another example would be doujinshi that I used to read and still read sometimes. And there are just some stories where the art is nowhere near to perfect, but because it kind of fits to the characters, because even though the characters are not drawn perfectly, they are really expressive and the humor is just great. So there are some doujinshi that I would buy anytime simply because the story just resonates so much with me, and it wouldn't even matter how well they're drawn because this artist is simply good at expressing themselves. So if a work is truly beautiful but has no good story, it most probably won't be remembered. Also, if the artwork is beautifully rendered but the pages are just drowning in detail, it will keep you just distracted from the story. And even if the story might not be too bad, if the artwork is just too overwhelming, it can simply distract you from the story and you don't know what's going on and you're just trying to figure out what the hell is happening. To find the balance is the key. It's important as a comic artist to be able to tell through your art what your story is about and to communicate what kind of content a reader can expect. Your art cannot be detached from the story. I think you can quite often see those works too, when you just see that someone is like a really good illustrator but simply not a good comic artist. Just because you can draw well doesn't mean that you can draw a good comic. Comics are still a visual medium, so there is no way of getting around learning how to draw properly. As a comic artist, you will always be judged more for your art than your story. How else can you explain the amount of just kind of all similar stories on the market that simply kind of the same. Still, even if they are the same, they sell. Works that don't have good art won't even make it to the bookstore in the first place. And a lot of comic artists do practice their art a lot, and they're just amazing. There are such good people out there. But in the process, the story gets forgotten quite often, or it's kind of taken for granted. It's something that barely gets practiced, if at all. If you want to create an amazing comic and get past this level of just another generic story, you will have to start to pay attention to the contents of your story. All this time I'll talk like I'm ready to the best-selling list. Again, what qualifies me to do this? I published some short stories that were read by 2.5 people. So don't take anything that I say here too seriously. I just want this to be talked about. I want to just learn some stuff myself. This is gonna be a process. I'm gonna learn a lot of things while I create my manga, and I want to talk about it with other people and just see where it goes. I think it is a really interesting but kind of neglected topic because, like I said, storytelling is kind of taken for granted and no one thinks that it has to be learned, but it has to be learned. Of course, there are some people who just geniuses and create great stories without learning anything. I mean, like, good for them. So, to finish this video, if you want to read a good story, you can buy a book. If you want great art, then you can go to an art gallery or buy an art book. But if you want to have both in one medium, that's where you get comics. This piece of perfect media. And this is what this series is gonna be about. It's gonna talk about how to combine art and storytelling in the best possible way in a comic. And we're just gonna talk about all different kind of stuff and see how we can use it for the stories we create, or even if you're interested in analyzing comics, this might be interesting for you too. So what is your opinion? As a reader or creator, what is more important to you, the art or the story? And were there maybe some works that really surprised you because you expected something totally different from the art? You can all write it down in the comment section below. It would also make me super happy if you subscribe to this channel and maybe even press the thumbs up button. Don't press the thumbs down button, I'm just starting. Don't kill me. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, where we'll just have some work in progress, maybe some character sheets and just some short comics from my daily life. I call them Olschi's Daily Bullshit. And you can read my manga Another Me on Animix and on Tapas. Thank you for watching and let's see where this journey takes us. I'll see you soon.